What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our SEC preseason preview. As always, I got my guy Ty joining me here to break down all the teams here in the SEC. But let's jump right into it here. And we're going to start with the team that is coming off of a okay year to their standards. But after Nick Saban leaving last year, Kalen DeBoer comes in, gets them to a 9-3 record in the regular season, just missing out on the playoff, losing to Michigan in a bowl game. And I think if you ask a diehard Alabama fan and they say, what do you expect from this year? I think at the bare minimum, it is a playoff berth. And I think, it's fair expectations in year two in DeBoer's, tenure there. I have them going 9-3. You do as well. I think the losses are all going to be road losses at Georgia, at South Carolina, and at Auburn at the end of the year in a heartbreaker. The week one game against Florida State, at Florida State, I think if that team just goes in there and steamrolls them, I might be 10-2 on Bama in I think they win one of those games. But if they somehow let Florida State hang around there, um, I think this team could possibly be even 8-4 when it's all said and done because they do have a pretty tough SEC schedule.
Yeah, I'm just not quite as high on Alabama as a lot of people are. I don't think Ty Simpson is the answer this year. I think they've had a lot more talent at the quarterback position than they're going to have this year. And I think that's going to show. I think LSU finally goes in there and gets a win. Alabama has really had their number over the last decade or so. And I think Auburn pulls the upset at home. Remember, the last two meetings at Auburn have been the 4th and 31. And then before that, it was the four overtime game against what was actually a pretty bad Auburn team that year. So I think Auburn finally gets the job done at home. And, 9-3 for most teams is a pretty solid year. For Alabama, back-to-back seasons with less than 10 wins, there'd be a lot of questions for Kalen DeBoer.
And kind of flipping the script here on an SEC team, top of the conference to kind of bottom. Last year, I think you can say Arkansas exceeded expectations. Now with KJ Jefferson returning under another year under his belt, how is this team going to react? And I think, they start out all right with cupcake games, but go to Mississippi, at Memphis, Notre Dame before your bye. I mean, you got to win at least two of the three if you want to be competitive this year. Then you come out and get on the road at Neyland, Texas A&M at home, Auburn could be hit or miss, Mississippi State, and then you finish with probably the worst three games in the SEC at LSU, at Texas, and home against what we think is going to be a very good Missouri team. I just don't see the bowl game appearance. I know you went 6-6. And I think that's probably their ceiling if you really want to talk about it this year. Um, I don't think they have a huge upset in them this year as they did last year. Maybe the only one I could see is probably Texas A&M at home. That'd probably be the best one, but I just don't see it this year for Arkansas.
Well, I think they barely squeak into a bowl game this year, and I'm not sure if that's going to be enough to keep Sam Pittman around. But I do think he's been a decent coach in his tenure here. They just don't have the NIL. They don't have, the recruiting rankings to keep up with the rest of the conference, and it's been showing the last few years. But I do think they surprised Missouri in the last game of the season in order to get to a bowl game. But outside of that, I don't really see them beating any of the top dogs in the conference. Like I said, they just don't quite have the talent to keep up. Last year, remember, they did pull that upset at home over Tennessee, but not much going on outside of that. So I think it's just another kind of mediocre year for the Hogs.
Yeah, I forgot to mention I am wearing my SEC shirt here for this video. And Auburn, I think, we talked about it that Alabama game. We both haven't beaten Bama at home. So I think there is some hope here for Auburn and Hugh Freeze. And for me, it's going to come down to quarterback play because this team just somehow, some way, always struggles with the quarterback. And, I think they're going to have a tough few weeks, I guess month you can say there at Oklahoma, at Texas A&M off. Georgia at home, Missouri at home. But I think after that, they run the table and possibly contend for an SEC championship. I know that they lose four in conference right away, but they're definitely going to maybe be in the thick of things when they go 4-0 at the back end, because who knows with this year with the SEC and how crazy it can get. But that Baylor game on Friday in Waco, that's going to determine, like I said, I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in the Baylor when we talked about Baylor. Whoever wins that game is going to be like 8-4, 9-3. Whoever loses that game is probably going to be 6-6. And obviously both of us having Auburn winning that game, and we're both at 8-4. Three of the four losses are the same. Number six in recruiting rankings coming in this year. If there's a year for Auburn to get back on their feet and upset Bama, I think it's this year.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I have them pulling that upset as well in the Iron Bowl, and I think they get things started with a big win in Waco. Tough 5 game stretch, like you said. I have them losing 4 of those 5 there, but Missouri being the only win, they could definitely lose that game. But then you turn around, and there is no reason they shouldn't be going into that Alabama game on a 3 game winning streak. I know Vanderbilt had a magical year last year, but they should have no problem going in there and getting the win. And then Kentucky and Mercer at home. Obviously, you should win those. So with all that momentum, I think that's another reason they can pull it off this year over Alabama. And 8-4 would be a huge stretch because Hugh Freeze has been recruiting well. He just doesn't quite have the wins yet to validate the talent he's bringing in. So I think that'd be a big step.
Yeah, and I think with this team, the wide receiver room is stacked. Obviously, Cam Coleman headlines that receiver room. So if you can just get the ball out wide and let your receivers make plays, I think that's going to make up for quarterback play. And talk about quarterback play, I think that's the key for this Florida Gators team. Obviously, we are not high on the Gators, but some people are 10-2, 11-1, maybe contending for the SEC championship, and I can understand it. DJ Lagway has to be healthy because when he was on the field last year, Florida was a completely different team. He's not healthy, then I think there's some cause for concern. Now, realistically, if I were to repick this schedule, I would probably say 8-4 would be the best I could do. Maybe I'd probably give them a loss to Georgia and then maybe winning that Kentucky and another road game anywhere else. But I just don't see it. The SEC is going to beat up on each other. When you have an out of conference game of Miami, which I think they're going to win, and USF, which I think could be a tough game for them at home, which you guys will see tomorrow night against Boise. Um, I don't know. I'm high on Florida, but I'm also not because they're in the SEC. Now you put them in the Big 12, Big 10, ACC. I think this is a 10-2 ball club.
Yeah, Florida is a team that gets really hurt this year by the schedule discrepancies. With these super conferences, teams are not playing anywhere near an equal schedule, and this is just absolutely brutal. I'm a lot higher on Florida than 6-6, but when this is how the schedule shakes out, it's hard for me to find more than 6 wins. You got LSU, Miami, A&M, and Ole Miss on the road. I don't think they get any of those, and then Texas and Georgia, 2 top 5 teams. I don't see them winning those, so. Is this team improved from last year? I think so. But unfortunately, the record's going to end up worse just because, they might have the hardest schedule in the entire country. And you mentioned it, they even have USF as another non conference game. That's no pushover. So the schedule's not doing them any favors. But I do think they rattle off wins over Tennessee and Florida State to end the year, which will get them in a bowl game. Now, will that be enough for Billy Napier to stay around? In my opinion, probably not, but time will tell.
Yeah, and now the team that I think is going to steamroll this conference, obviously both of us have them going 11-1. I have them losing the game to Florida in Jacksonville this year. And I think that's going to be their only loss because it feels like they've just dominated that series. And I think if there's any year they lose it, it's this one because of how much talent Florida actually has. But you look there at Tennessee, I think is going to dictate how this season's going to go in week 3. Now, if they can go in there, I'm assuming they're going to be a touchdown or more favorite and beat them by 2 possessions. I think we're going to be very confident in this Georgia team moving forward. Their harder games are in the bulk of the season in the middle there. And the Texas game, we could see an SEC championship rematch. We could see a playoff rematch. I just think that game is probably going to be not only for the number one team in the country, but also for sole possession of the SEC championship lead at that point in the season. And obviously for Georgia, they're fortunate enough where that's their last conference game. So they just have to wait to see. Now, if they win that game and win out, then more than likely they're gonna get in an SEC championship if they beat Texas. But don't sleep on that Georgia Tech game on the road. Well, I don't think it's on the road this year, right?
No, at Mercedes Benz this
Yeah.
year, but in Atlanta.
Yeah. So pretty close. I mean, it's a home game every year for both teams, let's be honest. But that Georgia Tech game, I think could really be the one that I think they somehow slip up and maybe finish 10-2. I mean, they'll still probably get in the playoff regardless, but Georgia, I think when they are getting overlooked and they're not the talk of the town, because of one bad year. We're talking one bad year and they go 11-3. So if that's their bad year and they aren't getting talked about enough, why can't Kirby Smart come in here and just steamroll this conference? They said Carson Beck was the problem or getting rid of him, and they're okay with that. We'll see how Gunnar Stockton fares this year in a loaded SEC schedule.
Yeah, I do think the schedule shakes out pretty well for them. Obviously, last year, Kirby Smart was no stranger to come right out and say they had a tough schedule, three brutal road games last year. This year, it's a little more favorable, but I do think Texas goes in there this year and beats Georgia. Remember, Georgia beat them twice last year and kind of embarrassed them on the road in the middle of the season last year. So I think Texas will obviously have that game circled. And, Arch Manning, I think there's going to be a little bit of some growing pains early in the year. But when this game is played in mid November, Texas will be in prime position to avenge those two losses. So I think that's the only blemish for Georgia this year. They're a really good team, as always, but I'm not sure they're 12-0 good. But 11-1 will put them firmly in the playoff and probably getting a bye.
I will say they haven't lost in 48 home games, so you picking that is going to destroy that streak. So, I mean, if there's any year or two, I think this would be the year in the SEC. And talking about winning streaks, it's definitely not this team. The Kentucky Wildcats over under 4.5. I mean, you look at that schedule, you're on the road at South Carolina, Georgia, Auburn, and Vandy, and then finish with Louisville. In your home games, well, you get rewarded with conference games of Mississippi, Texas, Tennessee, and Florida of your conference. And I don't know, they might lose to Toledo. Who even knows with this Kentucky team? I'm going 4-8, and I think that might be generous because I really could see them just going over in SEC play this year.
You took the words out of my mouth because 3-9 might be generous from me. Toledo, remember, they went to Mississippi State last year, who was probably the worst team in the SEC. They absolutely ran them out of their building. I want to say it was 41-15, if I remember correctly. They absolutely destroyed them. So I'm not saying Kentucky's going to lose that game, but it would not shock me at all. And if that's the case, it's going to be a really long year. Obviously, I'm already predicting it to be that way. I think this is probably the end of the Mark Stoops era this year. Just not a lot to look forward to. What do we got there? Yeah, it was pretty close. Pretty close.
41-17.
Yeah. But yeah, I just don't see a lot of success this year for Kentucky. Mark Stoops has been, no stranger to come out and say they have no NIL funding for football. They can't keep up with the talent of the rest of the conference. And, it's just going to show this year, and I think they'll move on.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if there's anyone even at that Tennessee Tech game at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And here's our other two teams that we got really making some noise. LSU, I think we both got them losing to Clemson. You have them running the table after that. And I have them losing to Alabama on the road. I think that's probably their toughest game after this. And I'm sure you're probably the one, if they were to lose another game, it probably would be that game. But LSU, if not now, when? I mean, I'm sure you're the same way. Nussmeier comes back. The defense is reloaded. There's really no excuse at this point for Brian Kelly. And I think he still goes 0 for 4 in that first
Yeah.
game against Clemson, but I can see him running the table as well. A very favorable SEC schedule. Now, that game at Oklahoma at the end of the year, I think could be the one where somehow, some way, they either don't get into the SEC championship or they're playing for a way to get into the SEC championship just because I think there's going to be a few top heavy teams here. But LSU, I mean, that's the story. If Kelly doesn't make the playoff this year, are they going to kind of want to buy him out?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I obviously am very high on him this year, but like you said, if it goes the other way, there's gonna be a lot of question marks from a fan base who is notoriously impatient. Remember, they fired Ed Orgeron a season and a half after having the best team probably in college football history. So anything is on the table this year. However, I think even after losing that first game at Clemson, like you said, making it 0-4 in first games under Kelly. I think they run the table. I don't think they lose another game the rest of the season. I think they go into Tuscaloosa, their toughest remaining game, and win that game. And then at Oklahoma, huge trap game to end the season because at that point they might already be in the SEC championship. But just I don't know what the vibes are going to be. in that Oklahoma program with Brent Venables? Are they even going to be keeping him around at that point? So I think they get out of that game and rattle off 11 wins in a row to make the SEC title.
In Mississippi State, I think unfortunately you're the bottom feeder. If your over under is 3.5, which is worse than Kentucky's at 4.5 in the SEC, I mean, I think 3-9 might be generous. They might lose one of those games to Southern Miss or NIU. I really don't have much to say here. They recruit well. Half of the team comes back, but you're in the SEC. Now you put this team in the Big Ten, they're probably a 500 ball club.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a little more to be excited about because at least you have a first-year head coach here at Mississippi State. I'm comparing them to Kentucky. These are really the two bottom teams. But I'll tell you what, that non-conference schedule, you get a road game in there, and you get Northern Illinois. We all know what they did last year, going into Notre Dame and winning. So don't sleep on that non-conference schedule either. But in the SEC, it's another 0-8 year. I want to say that's what it was last year as well.
Hmm.
So, not much improvement this year, but at least you have a new coach, which can hopefully bring in some better recruiting and, get some more wins in the future.
And then you got Missouri. I think this team is the team that a lot of people are saying is the sleeper team, but I'm going to take it one step further. I think this team can really make the SEC championship. Now they can't have a hiccup there. Look at their schedule: Alabama and Texas A&M, and I guess you could argue the Oklahoma game are the two or three games that could really trip this team up. But don't sleep on that week 2 matchup against Kansas because if they can beat Kansas at home, I think that's when everybody's going to kind of buy into this Missouri team and really look at that schedule and say, yeah, they can run the table. I have them going 9-3. I did have them going 10-2 at one point, but I just like Nebraska over Missouri, so I had them losing one more game, flipping the switch. But a double-digit win season for Eli Drankowitz is definitely on the table this year.
Yeah, everyone seems to be really high on Missouri. We had Nebraska, surprising a lot of people this year. A lot of people feel the same way about Missouri, maybe a dark horse playoff team. I don't quite see it this year. I just remember last year, this team was sitting at 7-2 at one point going into that South Carolina game. And I remember thinking, this is the worst 7-2 football team I've maybe ever seen because they were just, barely beating bottom feeders in the SEC. The offense was giving me Iowa vibes last year with Brady Cook out. He's not back, so they're going to have to figure it out at the quarterback position. And it's a tough schedule. You got at Alabama, at Auburn. I think they lose both of those. A&M and South Carolina. Those could both go the other way very easily, but I have them losing those. So I think, the schedule doesn't do them a lot of favors, and I just don't think this offense will be dynamic enough to keep up with some of these teams. So it's a 6-6 year, a step back, but I still think Eli Drinkwitz is the guy from Missouri.
And then you got Oklahoma, and I'm saying Brent Venables is fired after that Tennessee game. Um, and I don't think they're going to win another game the rest of the year because at Alabama, Missouri at home, LSU, yeah, I'm sorry, it's over. Brent Venables is gone. But I think this story could be changing, kind of like where you are, 7-5, 8-4. If they can beat Michigan at home in week 2, then I think Venables might have a chance to stay towards the end of the year. But who knows? Oklahoma fans are already impatient. And if they get off to a slow start, let's say they go 2-2, losing to Michigan and Auburn at home, I wouldn't be shocked if they got rid of him after that.
Yeah, the Michigan game is absolutely huge for the vibes of this program. Not necessarily uh, make or break for the college football playoff. Obviously, it's an out of conference game, but coming off a 6-7, a brutal season last year, I think this team really needs that boost early in the season. I think they get it. Obviously, I'm a big Michigan fan, but I just think that's a tough ask when you have a barely 18-year-old quarterback in his second career start going into that environment at night. I think it's going to be tough. So I'm giving Oklahoma the benefit of the doubt there. But once you get into SEC play, lots of tough games that I don't really see them coming out with wins. So I think it's a 7-5 season for Oklahoma. I think that buys Venables one more year, but patience is going to be running pretty low.
And then you got the other team in Mississippi, Ole Miss. This is the team that's going to miss out on the playoff every single year. Let's be honest. They're just unfortunately that team that has enough, but somehow finds a way to lose a game they shouldn't. But this year, there's a lot tougher schedule than they've had in years past in SEC play. Both of us having losing three there to LSU at home, Georgia on the road, and Oklahoma on the road. I have them losing one more to South Carolina because I think when things get bad, they get worse for Ole Miss. Seems like they don't ever turn around in a positive. But if they can somehow win two of those four that I have in losses, this team's going to make the playoff because it's all right in front of them, especially at the end of the year there. An easy game at the end of the year that you're going to go into Mississippi State and probably blow them out. I don't know. I just don't know. Lane Kiffin is losing a lot. He only has five returning starters. Obviously, Jackson Dart's gone. Trey Harris is gone. Your top two guys on offense. So this team has to reload. And if they can reload and get off to that 4-0 start and somehow, some way find a way to beat LSU, then I think our opinions are going to change on this Ole Miss team.
Yeah, I mean, I basically have their season coming down to that middle 4 game stretch. I have them losing three of those four, sandwiched with a really weird mid-October non-conference game with Washington State. But I think, if they can go into Oklahoma and they can win that game, those last 4 games are all very winnable, and they could end up 10-2 when it's all said and done. Like you said, I think they just lost a little too much for me to put them anywhere above 9-3, which is what they were last year. Last year was really their best opportunity I think they'll have for a while to get into the playoff. They had a golden opportunity and obviously squandered it against Florida. So I think this year it's more of the same at 9-3. But this program is still moving in the right direction under Lane Kiffin.
And then South Carolina, I think if there is any team that can cause chaos in the conference, it's going to be this team because look at that schedule. You got at Missouri, at LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Mississippi, at Texas A&M, and Clemson to top it off at the end of the year. If you want to cause chaos in the college football playoff, look at this South Carolina team. I have them going 8-4. They're going to get some big wins there, but they just unfortunately have too many big teams on this schedule where it's going to hurt them in the long run. They possibly have a Heisman winning quarterback on this team. Why am I blanking on his name? What's his name?
Norris Sellers.
Norris Sellers. That's right. And if he has a great season, then maybe this team somehow, some way is that surprise team and finishes 10-2. But that Clemson game at the end of the year could really dictate a playoff spot for both those teams.
Yeah, I think South Carolina is just a classic example of a team with a really good returning quarterback, a really good returning defensive lineman, and really not much else. It seems like we've fallen into this idea that that's all you need. If that's what you have coming back, you're going to be a great team. But I think there's a lot of holes still on this team that popped up in the middle of last season. I think you'll see a little more of it this year. They do start out with a pretty easy 5 game stretch, about as easy as you can get in the SEC, but then it picks right up. I mean, you got at LSU, Alabama, and Ole Miss within a 4 game stretch there. So I think the back half of the season is where things are going to kind of nosedive for South Carolina. I would not be surprised if they upset Clemson at home to finish the year. They've pulled it off a few times here over the last few years, but I just don't quite see it. And I think it's 7-5, which for a team that has a lot of hype would be pretty disappointing.
And then a team that I think their ceiling realistically this year is 9-3. Obviously, the quarterback play, the first ever college football trade of trading Nico Imaliava to UCLA for Joey Aguilar, both going to be the starting quarterbacks for each program there. And the wide receiver room for Tennessee is the big concern for me. A lot of these guys are hurt, transferred. I think right now they only have it's either five or six scholarship players that are healthy on that Tennessee team. So if they go down, if anyone goes down, I don't know. The depth for me is the big concern for Tennessee, and it's going to show in those games where you need depth and against Georgia, against Alabama, Florida on the road. But if they can somehow win one of those three, this team might make the playoff and really surprise a lot of people and exceed expectations.
Yeah, I think if you're a Tennessee fan, the thing you should be most excited for this year is the schedule. I think they have the easiest schedule in the conference. I don't even know if it's really that close. Obviously, you got to play Georgia and Alabama, but you get one of them at home. And the reason I have them 9-3, look at the 9 wins. I mean, those are 9 pretty easy games for being in arguably the toughest conference in the country. I mean, it's really hard to see them dropping any of those outside of maybe Oklahoma at home. But yeah, I think the schedule does this team tons of favors after losing their quarterback in summer ball. So I think they do have a chance. for an outside playoff berth if they can maybe get past the Florida game late in the season. But I think 9-3 is the realistic prediction for this team, who has the big question mark at quarterback.
And the team that doesn't have a big question mark at quarterback is the Texas Longhorns. Obviously, Steve Sarkisian and Arch Manning have been the talk of the town since Ohio State won the national championship. The day after, everyone wanted to buy in on the Arch hype. And, why would you not buy in this hype? We've never seen a prospect this highly anticipated for his team now. Quinn Ewers gave him the keys last year after they lost to Ohio State in the semi, and they're going to go to Ohio State and unfortunately lose this game, as you can see here, as we both have them. But you have them running the table after that, just like LSU. And I have them almost running the table, but like we said, that Georgia game is going to be the game that you're going to look at. But easy schedule, yeah, I think so. Out of conference, obviously, besides the Ohio State game, cupcakes, and then the Texas A&M game, the rivalry game, which finally got renewed after them joining the SEC last year. Obviously, is great to see, but I think for time to tell this year, 9.5 wins for Texas kind of feels like a crime, and I think we're both going to go with that over.
Yeah, I guess as it turns out, I have an SEC championship game with two teams who are going to be on an 11-game winning streak. And that'd be a lot of fun. I think Texas, just like LSU, drops their first game. I think it's a big ask for a quarterback who, yes, is a Manning, but has not had a lot of in-game experience. He's got to go to the defending national champions and play them in their house. I think that's going to be tough. But I think this team ends up maybe being a better team than Ohio State when it's all said and done. I think they continue to put it together throughout the season. I think they go into Athens and get a huge win over Georgia. And this team, just like LSU, runs the table the rest of the year, goes 11-1.
And then the other team in Texas, like we already said, they're going to lose to Texas at home. But 9-3, we both got them losing the same amount of games, winning the same games. 7.5 wins, I feel like, is another one in the SEC that I would take on the over here. Their out of conference is pretty easy besides the game at Notre Dame. Um, Sandwiched in the middle there, going into LSU, they should only have one loss. And if they can win that game, this team's going to be a playoff team when it's all said and done, and maybe even contending for an SEC championship when they go into Texas at the end of the year. Um, I don't know. There's hype there. Elko's got this team in a position where, Jimbo never had him, and that's all I need to know here. Because if Texas A&M can finally get over that hump of just even getting into the playoff, then I think they're going to be set for the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, lots of returning talent this year for Texas A&M. I do think Marcel Reed is still a bit of a question mark, but if you're an A&M fan, obviously you're going to point to that LSU game last year where he looked like the second coming of Cam Newton. And if you can get that version of Marcel Reed, this could be a playoff team. But as we know, Texas A&M has been 8-4 over the last decade or so, ever since Johnny Football has left. So I think this year, 9-3, I have them having one of their best seasons in the last decade. So can't be too mad about that. But those three losses, I mean, which one of those are they realistically going to win? I don't see them taking any of them. So I think 9-3 is about as good as it can really get this year for A&M. But like you said, Elko is definitely the guy, and I expect them to do a lot more winning in the future.
And then the last team in the SEC are the Kings of Tennessee and the SEC, according to their quarterback, Diego Pavia. This guy has all the confidence in the world after beating Bama. I mean, I get it, but 4.5 is still your over or under. I have them going over. I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. They should win all of their non-conference games, and that's three right there. They can definitely beat Kentucky, maybe even Auburn at home. Um, but after that, I think they're going to have some miracle games and catch teams when unfortunately have a bad game. And Vanderbilt plays great football to win. They do return a lot on offense, which is kind of why I'm giving them that 6-6 for the hope. If they can have another 6-6 season, I think doing that 2 years in a row in the SEC, this program is definitely trending upward. And I wouldn't be shocked if this team has a top 30 recruiting class next year.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Obviously, the Vanderbilt season last year was magical. No one really saw them being a bowl team, especially beating Alabama. And people forget they did compete with Texas as well. Texas had to go into Nashville, and Vanderbilt was right there in that game as well. But I think this year they kind of take a step back. I know Diego Pavia's back, but it's a tough schedule here for Vanderbilt. And obviously the talent is never quite there compared to the rest of the conference. So I unfortunately think 4-8. I'd love to see this program build off that momentum of last year, but I can't really find any more wins.
Yeah, and that's going to be it for our SEC and Power Four conference breakdown. Check back later this week as we break down the week 0 games. But until the next time, Bench Buddies are out.